host, Nass, on another special episode, Nass the Pause, Season 5. I have a great jam-packed episode for y'all. This episode is basically called, I mean, you guys don't live under a rock. I've kind of given some hints out that I was going to talk about Trae Young and the whole trade and everything. But I have the Trae Young saga that I'll kick that off with. And then I have 5 trending NBA observations around the league that have come to my attention over the past week or so. So I guess we'll just kick it off with that. Anyways, like I said, 6 NBA observations. I'm going to kick it off with the Trae Young stuff. This past week, Trae Young was traded to the Washington Wizards, not per his request, but obviously of all the teams that were inquiring about Trae Young, and I'm pretty sure his market was pretty minimal to none, him and his representation came out after months and months on about basically the Hawks kind of dangling Trae Young. They can't decide whether they're going to trade him. They can't decide whether they're going to retain him. He gets an MCL injury, I think, within the first 3 weeks of the season. Jalen Johnson takes off, even though, he showed us a lot of signs last year before he got hurt. And the sad part about it is the Hawks have been winning games. They've been a lot more competitive. Their defense, people have been pointing to that as to why the Hawks were able to move off Trae because, he doesn't play defense. The Hawks aren't that great of a defensive team overall anyways. There were flashes that Trae Young and Jalen Johnson could coexist. So I don't want people to create this narrative that Trae Young is just this guy that no one wants to play with, no one wants to coexist with, build with, etc. But yeah, so Trae Young was traded to the Wizards for CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert. CJ McCollum is on an expiring contract. Inevitable that he was going to get moved. Talented scoring vet that can, give you some supplemental scoring in the half court. At this point of his career, you would think that he'd probably want to be on a contender or a team that has some championship aspirations, and he can definitely uplift a team. So Atlanta doesn't exactly, suit that definition of, championship aspiration type of team, but they are a team that is in the playoff hunt in the East. Atlanta's been in the play in each of the past 5 years. It's like Atlanta, Chicago, Miami, and I think Toronto. Those are the 4 Eastern Conference play-in capitals around the whole league. Every year, at least 3 of those teams, just put your money on it. They're going to be in the play-in. So he's added to a young and rising Atlanta Hawks squad. I've talked about them a little bit earlier this year. I like the pieces, but personally, I do think the Hawks rushed the trade. I'm not mad that they decided to move off Trae Young. I mean, the clock has been ticking. The writing has kind of been on the wall. The MCL injury came at a really tough time, especially because the other new Hawks players like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he came over in free agency. He really took off, 23-3. I've talked about him being a most improved player candidate. Trae hasn't really gotten the reps to really get acclimated with his new teammates. That's the sad part, because in another world, I believe that at least he and Jalen Johnson, they can coexist. That can really be a legit offensive power duo. Trae Young, over his last 4 games, after his MCL injury, he came back. His first 4 games back, he averaged 24 points, 10 assists, 67 true shooting. And the Hawks actually, they ranked 11th best defense. I know I said that they weren't a great defense, but I went back and I matched up the dates to see when Trae left and when he returned. And during that span, that period of time, the Atlanta Hawks had the 11th best defense by metrics. I mean, that doesn't completely scream championship to you, but it shows that the roster was trending in the right direction. They were able to make up for, I don't want to say Trae Young's lapses, but just the constant targeting. And he's I don't even know how tall he is. He's probably 5'11", 6 feet. I don't even know how tall he is, but it's tough because it seems like the Trae Young, Ja Morant, the idea of the smaller guard being not just maybe your primary piece on a championship winning team, but being one of your 2 best players. I guess, the writing is on the wall that no one wants to value these guys. These guys, if you can't really shoot effectively, which Trae Young surprisingly hasn't been able to the past couple years, if you can't really constantly, basically neutralize a defense, constantly find disadvantages or create them, then you're kind of like at a loss of hope of, you know, being like having the careers of like Chris Paul's and Steph Curry's, where a franchise is going to devote 6, 7 years to you despite your limitations. And it's tough because Trae Young's a really, really talented player, but I don't want people to run with the narrative that he couldn't play with others or, and you heard guys like Ricochet, Jalen Johnson, Alexander Walker, they were really, really like speaking high of Trae, and Nikhil said he's the only reason why he came to Atlanta. And this is what, goes into it. Like if you don't have certain stars, like certain free agents, they might not even pick up the phone. They might not even consider, going to a certain city. So I just want people to really understand like what Trae Young's impact was in Atlanta during these past 8, 9 years. It's been a while. I'm not mad that he wanted to get flipped. I get it. Change of scenery. The Hawks were keen on flipping him, and what are you gonna do if the team is continuously telling you like trying to move you, we're trying to move you? You might as well, make the most of the departure. Trae Young is owed $95 million over the next 2 years. That includes a player option for 2026, 2027 at $45 million. That was pretty much the big domino, I would say, the biggest factor in why he got traded. If Trae Young was in another scenario and maybe his contract wasn't looming like next year, I think Atlanta would consider running it back, because for the package you got Trae Young at, which personally I think is just pennies to the dollar, you brought in CJ McCollum, you brought in Corey Kispert, 2 shooters, but that's not helping you come out of the East. And I don't know. I feel like guys that talented at your disposal, you have to maximize the return. You just have to, because guys like Trae Young, they don't come every blue moon. And not to mention, you doubled down on taking Trae Young after you traded the pick for Luka Doncic. Now, obviously, we can do our revisionist history and look back on it and be like, you know what, that was an awful trade, yada yada yada. But I mean, both those guys ended up being all NBA, all star caliber players. So it was kind of eye for eye. Like in the moment of the draft night, if you knew both these guys were going to be all stars, it's just too early to tell like who was really going to be the astronomical player. And in this case, we know it's Luka. But like I said, I don't want people to run with the narrative that he could not play with the current teammates on the Hawks right now. Guys like Okongwu, who's a most improved player candidate as well, just like Nikhil, bringing Kristaps in free agency. And I was high on them. I was high on them, just like my man Zach Lowe. I was high on the Hawks. I bought high on them. And, sometimes, I don't know. The MCL injury just came in a really, really tough time. But the Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, like 2-man lineups, they were a minus 10.3 net. And I think a lot of that goes to, you would think it would just be defense, like, oh, Trae and Jalen Johnson, they can exist. But I did a little bit more digging into like the lineups and the rotations that made sense for the Hawks and Quinn Snyder. So Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Okongwu. Those 4-man lineups had a plus 11.3 net rating in 29 possessions. Now, hear this. Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Zach Ricochet, they had a plus 66.5 net rating in 19 possessions. I know it's not a large sample size, but these are the only numbers we have. And, some of that, it might not tell the whole truth, but it definitely tells part of it. So if you substituted Zach Ricochet from either of those 4 lineups and you inserted Dyson Daniels, both those 4-man lineups had negative net ratings. So basically, whenever Trae Young and Dyson Daniels were on the court together, things just didn't bode well. For whatever reasons, I don't watch enough Hawks basketball to sit here and tell you, but I've seen enough, and I can imagine that because Dyson's not the most creative on-ball, threat. He's a defensive specialist. He's an okay 3-point shooter, not terrible. I'm not sure how he is when he's kind of stationary and watching Trae Young dribble 14 out of the 24 seconds out of the shot clock. And Trae Young doesn't do that as much anymore. But you do want to keep in mind that with the ascension of Jalen Johnson, I feel like it might have been tougher for Dyson Daniels to find his spot on offense necessarily. It's not like this guy is sending 100 screens for Trae Young like Capella was and Okongwu was over the past 2-3 years. But that was an interesting, metric that I had seen on Cleaning the Glass, that Dyson Daniels versus Zach Richiche with Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, and Okongwu. Those were two complete different lineups. And essentially they had two different identities. So I want people to actually, think about that. So Travis Schlenk, the Hawks' former GM, he is the VP of Player Personnel in DC. You can kind of put two and two together that he was probably the mastermind behind at least getting the Wizards, to sign off on, bringing in Trae Young. And I'm not sure if that means Trae Young is gonna try and build something in Washington, or if he's just gonna go to Washington, be a good soldier, put up numbers, build his value back up, a little similar to when Russell Westbrook was in Washington, and then kind of wait till the point guard landscape, maybe see if it kind of differentiates, or if certain guys go here, certain guys go there, and see if there's another open spot. Because like I said earlier this week, we are in the point guard galore of the NBA. Point guard galore era of the NBA. Every team has, if not a point guard in line that is going to be their dynamic, like a Dylan Harper, they might already have a guy established, like a Darius Garland, like a LaMelo Ball, like a Cade Cunningham, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, like the list goes on. So I think with Trae Young specifically, I don't know if I want to say he's waiting on that exact moment, but I do think this is a good opportunity for him to build his value up. The Wizards, they have a lot of guards, so it's kind of like, you know what I mean, devil's advocate, but the Wizards, like, that is an insane flip. You know what I mean? Corey Kispert and CJ McCollum, you don't give up any draft capital. You bring in an all-NBA caliber player who's only 28 years old. That can help you at least bridge for the future. You know what I mean? And a big man like Alex Sarr. Trae Young is still one of the best floor raisers in the league. I can't reiterate this enough. And I just think that he and Alex Sarr, they can thrive together. You got Trey Johnson, a shooter, like lights out knockdown shooter at that. He's going to get some of CJ shots, some of Corey Kispert's shot. Keyonte George, probably, one of their more valuable players the past couple years. Then you got guys like Bub Carrington, AJ Johnson, projects at the guard position that they're still trying to figure out. But I'm still pretty high on them. I mean, in terms of just like talent, like they're getting there. They're starting to figure out at least who the young core is going to be. So I think that's just as important as anything. And I think bringing Trae Young is going to at least accelerate that process, especially when you're bringing in a guy who's been a franchise player for almost a decade. He's coming in and he can, show guys the ropes. And I think that's pretty important. But yeah, bottom line, the Wizards, I would say the Wizards won the trade because the Hawks, you're not getting out of the East with CJ or Corey Kispert. I wouldn't be shocked if you pulled something like, trying to reroute CJ elsewhere in hopes of additional draft capital. I think it's crazy that the Hawks didn't get any draft capital for Trae Young. And what's crazy is, like, you look back at, like, not the stars, but notable names, prominent names around the league that got moved. Mikal Bridges, that guy went for 5 picks. Desmond Bane, I like Desmond Bane. I like Mikal Bridges too, but that guy went for 5 picks too. Neither of those guys have even sniffed an All-Star game. So what message are you sending to the market when you have a guy like Trae Young and he's able to go for pennies on the dollar? Like, that is, like, for me, that's the most shocking part. Like, if you thought he doesn't fit your timeline, if you want to retool, cool, I get it. But flipping him for that and not waiting for, like, not waiting for the best package for your organization going forward, personally, I think that's NBA trade malpractice. But that's me. You know what I mean? I just don't understand how do you do that? That's the Trae Young stuff. I think he's gonna ball. I think he's gonna do in Washington. Obviously, he's still doing with a quad. I don't think he's playing within, like, the next couple of days, but I think they're gonna reevaluate him next year. But yeah, that's the Trae Young saga that's gone down this past week. I know everyone had a million podcasts to hear about it, and I had dropped a little mini 2-3 minute kind of rant / dialogue thing where I was kind of informing what I was thinking about the Trae Young trade. So next on the 5 NBA observations, I want to talk about the Boston Celtics. one more time. Because I think Jaylen Brown, after another week, 2 weeks of improved play, outstanding MVP level of play, he has now, I think he's got to be in the top 3 MVP voting. Top 3 MVP voting right now, especially after that 50 piece against Kawhi. That was one of those like MVP finalist caliber moments. You know what I mean? Because obviously, like the MVP, whoever it's going to be, whether it's Joker or Shea or Jalen or whatever, you have these defining moments, right? Now, as the season progresses, if Jalen ends up getting an MVP, if he ends up coming back and really winning this thing, you're gonna look to that Kawhi game where he came into his house, poured in 50, slowed him down on defense. You're gonna look at that game and be like, wow, that might have been the defining moment in Jaylen Brown's MVP campaign. And you see this all the time in history. Like with I like to bring up the infamous 2017 NBA MVP race with Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard. All those guys had plenty of moments that they displayed throughout the season. So far this year, Jaylen Brown, 29.7 points, 6.4 rebounds, 4.9 assists, 59 true shooting, 52% effective field goal percentage on pull-up jump shots. He's shooting 40.7% on pull-up three-point jump shots. 40.7%. That is like probably the most shocking metric I've seen from him this year. He's very productive in isolation, averaging a tick over a point per possession. That's 6th in the NBA amongst guys that have had at least 100 or more isolation possessions. The real reason why I wanted to get into this again is because obviously we know Jayson Tatum's return is looming. And right now, Celtics are 3rd in the East, 3rd in net rating. Tatum and Brown last year in the playoffs. I want people to really hear this. Tatum and Brown last year in the playoffs, amongst all two-man lineups in the East during the first round, Tatum and Brown posted a plus 12.7 net. That was the best amongst all possible NBA duos in the playoffs last year. That is a big deal because we were really starting to see both of them come into their own, whereas like they were almost mastering the taking turns, kind of a little bit like KD and Westbrook. I always like to bring up the KD and Westbrook parallels because those guys at their peak together were first-team All-NBA guys, top 5 MVP voting guys. What Jalen's doing right now, he's basically matched Tatum the same way Russell brought it up a level to match KD. Everyone knew that KD was a franchise guy. Everyone knew that Tatum was a franchise guy. Granted, Jalen came in a year before him, but their roles were a little bit different. Jalen kind of came as a role guy, kind of earned everything. Not to say Tatum didn't, but Tatum was kind of more so hand gifted this role. Like you're going to start, you're going to be able to be our, go-to scorer in the half court. Brown and Tatum, what they were able to do in the playoffs together, I thought that was really like a preview of what we were going to see from them the next 2 years because both these guys are in their primes. Like they're absolute primes. Like just like peak of ability, taking into account experience. Those guys have been to 2 finals together. I think right now, like obviously when they lost, that was going to be, they were turning the corner. They were really about to really, really wreak havoc across the league. And I think Jaylen Brown coming into this year, chip on his shoulder, all the naysayers. I think when Tatum gets back, obviously I don't want to put an expectation that he needs to be this top 5 MVP voting guy that he's been the past 5 years. But his ability to rebound at a high level, his ability to catch and shoot from deep, his ability just to know where to be in a Missoula offense, in a Missoula defense, that's going to help out Jalen so much. Because, you can just give Tatum some of the Hauser minutes, some of the Baylor Sharman minutes. And, as the season goes on, like he's going to get better and better and better. And let's see what version of the Celtics that we have come playoff time. But if Jalen can maintain and sustain this level of play, I have no doubts about Tatum. Tatum's going to come back. He's not going to be the 26, 27 per game scorer. But he's going to come in and he's going to be one of the best role guys in the NBA. Like off the bat. Like we already know he's a 5-tool guy. He impacts everything. He stuffs the stat sheet. There's not one facet of the game that he cannot contribute to. So I want people to just keep an eye out on that because I know everyone's like, is Tatum going to return? Tatum's definitely going to return now. Like that's just a fact. If Jalen hadn't been playing at this level, maybe the Celtics were hanging around 7th, 8th in the East. I still think Jayson Tatum would come back because that's just how competitive he is. But Jaylen Brown really being at this level right now, like that's pretty much confirmed that we can't waste a year like this. We just can't. I mean, what's to say what's going to happen next year? I don't think we can do anything to really alter what's happened, but the most ideal outcome for a situation like this where Tatum goes down, this is how you'd want it to look like. Tatum goes down, JB picks up the pieces, Celtics and Mazzulla himself, who haven't been given enough credit for being able to get this team to be competitive on the fly, really with only a couple months under in the offseason. I think Tatum, who's a lineup-proof guy, he's going to be able to fit, and they're going to be trouble, especially in this wide-open East. There hasn't been one East team that has pulled away. I've said on numerous occasions that the New York Knicks, they're a very, very elite team. But like I said, I need to see it. You know what I mean? You don't just get handed the baton in the East. You need to earn it. You know, I don't even know if I should take them over a Giannis-led team because Giannis has shown that he's been that. And granted, the Knicks might be better from maybe 4th guy to 10th guy, more so than Milwaukee, maybe a Boston. But the chemistry, the camaraderie, the system, the way that guys are able to just thrive on both ends of the floor, I feel like that's something that needs to be taken a little bit more serious, especially because we're approaching almost the halfway point of the season. We're about 36, 37 games under our belt. So I just love where we're at. I love where the Seas are at, and I just want to continue to remind people that when Tatum does come back, you know, it's gonna be seamless. Like obviously shooting wise, getting buckets, it'll be rusty for him a little bit. You know, you don't just take a year off of anything, no matter what craft or what you do in this life, and then come back and you just pick it up. That doesn't happen. It's gonna take a little bit, but I'm very confident that he's gonna be able to do so this year. And I think when he is, I'm not even going to say if, because I know he is, when he is able to get acclimated and get back to that level, maybe not this year, next year, I still think the Celtics have a chance to come out of the East this year. And that's something that I didn't believe 2 weeks ago. But after this, just the sustained level of play and the chemistry and, you know, even Anthony Simons, I saw a clip of him where he missed a three-point shot. It basically accelerated a fast break. He booked it down the court and made a chase down block. And I've never seen Anthony Simons make a chase down block ever in my life. Ever. And that's a guy that is a little bit more athletic than he's given credit for, but for him to make a defensive play like that, that was a little that play was a little deeper to me because that, you know, he's been on the fringes where it's like, all right, are we gonna move him? Mazzulla has kind of been playing cat and mouse games with his playing time. I had bigger expectations for Anthony. I thought this was gonna be a 20, 21 point per game scorer. I thought he was going to fit seamless in Mazzulla's system with the shooting and the spacing and everything. I thought he was going to be perfect fit. But obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it. And he's adjusting and whatnot. But yeah, I honestly think that a play like that not just defines your season, but it might be the reason that he doesn't get flipped at the deadline. You know what I mean? And this is a guy that since we acquired him, it's been like, all right, are we going to trade Anthony? What are we doing? But that's how I feel about the Celtics right now. Next observation. The Portland Trailblazers, are they a move away from being a Western Conference spoiler? Sorry, my Celtics fans. The Celtics are second in the East. Second in the East, chat. Portland Trailblazers are, like I said, 9th in the Western Conference standings. They are 5 games out of the 6th seed. I watched 2 games against the Rockets past, I think they had 2 and 3 nights. 2 games in Portland. Houston had a little home and home with them. Houston lost both games. It was a remarkable couple of days of basketball. I'm not going to lie to you. Denny Advia has ascended up my MVP mountain. For those of you that follow Nass on Instagram, he's officially been added to the mountain. He's averaging 26 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, 61% true shooting. And he also leads the league in and ones. And I think he's amongst the league leaders in drives per game. So Denny Advia, I don't have listed in front of me how many players are averaging 26, 7, and 7, but it's probably like a short list of like him, Jokic, and Luka, I'd imagine. So the Portland Trailblazers, those 2 games that I saw versus the Houston Rockets, it was very telling because I've been very high on the Rockets. Now I will say Şengün was out for both of the games, But still, what the Blazers were able to do, and don't forget, they're still without Drew Holiday, they're still without Scoot Henderson, they're still without Matisse Thybulle. They have some injuries that they've been able to kind of withstand throughout the season. But Denny Advia 100% should be in the MVP conversation, like dark horse, because that's just how much he means to the team. Shaden Sharp, he's averaging a career high 20 points, something points per game, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. The first couple weeks of the season, he was kind of here and there, but then he got hurt. Then he was brought off the bench for a little bit to kind of load manage him. But those two guys, they're two of the most like young, fearless guys in the West. Like, think about the Blazers. They may not be the most talented team, but guess what? Those guys are gonna play hard. Those guys are 100% gonna play hard. I think Tiago Splitter has done an outstanding job after the Chauncey Billups stuff has gone down. But like I said, they're ninth in the West. They're eighth in rebounds. They are third in free throw attempts per game, and they're also second offensive rebounds. So they control the boards for the most part. And this was against a Rockets team that actually leads the league in rebounds. They control the boards and they get to the free throw line. That is very, very vital if you want to be a playoff team. You know what I mean? Because you want to be able to control the pace and you're controlling the possession era. If you're winning the boards, you're controlling the possession era. It's tough to look at this Blazers team and be like, they're not ready. I really do think they're like, if they were to make a move, I don't have their cap space. I didn't list that on here, but if they get one more guy, also Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant is also sidelined. Whether it's a trade piece or whether they get two of those three guys, whether it's Drew, Jeremy Grant, Scoot Henderson, those 2-3 guys, they get those guys back. They continue to play with the fire that they're playing with, and Denny can sustain this level of play. I think they have a chance to at least not just like come out of the plane. I think they have a chance to even chase down those 5 games out of the 6th seed. The 6th seed is the Rockets. They just took 2 games from them. Their 5-man lineup of Shaden Sharp, Denny Advia, Chris Murray, Tumani Kamara, and Donovan Clingan. That 5-man lineup is pacing a plus 19.3 net rating. Of all lineups that have played at least that amount of time in the same span, they are third in the NBA. Third in the NBA. So they have the third best starting 5 since December 1st. If I told you that last week, no one here would believe me. So Portland is a good team. Caleb Love, who's on a 2-way contract, 16 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 61% true shooting. He plays crunch time for them. He's been really, really good. It's getting to a point where, like, if Scoot comes back, and I like Scoot. I think he's a very underrated point of attack defensive guy. I think he's an underrated playmaker. I think when he really knows how to get downhill and utilize his speed and pace, he can be a pretty dangerous like offensive weapon. But Caleb Love, I can't just have a blind eye to this. He's been one of the best crunch guys for them all year. I mean, he plays. I think he had like 18 points last night against the Rockets. He's been amazing. And you just don't see assets like that really thrive off a 2-way. Now, as a UNC basketball fan, I've seen Caleb Love on the big stage. He's that type of guy. He's an NBA player. He's not a G League guy. This is an NBA player. Even when he transferred to Arizona and continued to do big things in the tournament, he is a very, very good basketball player, and he should be in the league. Yeah, I really do think they're either a trade move away, or if they can get Jeremy or Drew or any of those guys back very soon. Last week, I talked about a couple East teams that could really potentially go the distance, or they could be very momentous as the season goes on past the All-Star break. I think the Blazers are one of those teams in the West. They're playing really good hoop. They have a go-to guy that, Denny Advia just outdueled Kevin Durant back-to-back games. Now, KD played very well, but I mean, Denny delivered the W. I feel like that has to count for something. So I would keep an eye out on the Trailblazers just a teeny bit as a team. Next observation, chat, is Keyonte George. Is he accelerating the Utah Jazz rebuild, or is he hurting it? Talk to me. On the season, Keyonte George, he's averaging 24 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, 60% true shooting, all career highs. He's averaging 0.96 points per possession in isolation, 0.92 points per possession as a pick and roll ball handler. Those are higher marks than Booker, Danny Advia, LaMelo Ball, which are guys that have very, very heavy on-ball gravity. The isolation numbers, those are higher metrics, or at least on par with guys like Tyrese Maxey, DeMar DeRozan, Kawhi, Denny Advia again. So Keyonte has not just been an empty stats guy. I don't want people to even think about that. I think this is a guy that has a real chance to make the Western Conference All-Star team. Like I really might vote him as a reserve. It's getting to that point. Like he's been so crucial for Utah, even when Lauri's not out there. He's been big for them. But the reason why I bring up is he accelerating the rebuild or is he hurting it? Because he's been so productive that I don't know if, and Utah, before I continue, Utah's 2.5 games out of the play-in, just to make the play-in. And obviously, I know Danny Ainge is going to have some tactics to kind of secure top 5 draft pick seeding or lottery pick seeding. Man, I don't know. I really do think that, what Keyonte is doing this year, it's been very, very special. Third year in the league. This is a guy that last year everyone knew he could play make. I think he's obviously adapted to the pace a little bit better. He knows his spots. Obviously understands his teammates. It's another year in the Will Hardy system. And I think Will Hardy deserves, just a tip of the hat because what he's been able to do with these players while also being asked to, kind of, and I hate the word tank, but that's what he's being asked to do. He's being asked to tank while also maximizing these guys. So Keyonte George, the number one example of that this year. I mean, the Jazz are 13th in the West. They have 10 million cap space. They have 3 guys that are going to be on expirings next year: Georges Niang, Yusuf Nurkic, Kevin Love. I think they need Cody Williams or Bryce Sensabaugh. I think they need one of those wings to hit. Both those guys are no older than 22. The conundrum is Lauri Markkanen is 28 years old. Usually a star player at that age, we already know he's approaching his prime if he's not already in it. But at the same time, you got to think about it. This is a guy that you'll probably, like you'd want to trade Lauri Markkanen, but what message is that sending to Keyonte George? Like Keyonte George is a guy that's going to need to be signed in a couple years. If you trade Lauri, you're kind of resetting the rebuild, but you don't want to be too good to lose out on this draft. This draft with Darren Peterson, AJ Dimensta, Boozer, Darius Acuff. This is going to be a really, really good draft. So I think the Jazz are kind of in a conundrum. And with Keyonte playing at this level, he's looking at opposing stars and outplaying them down the stretch. So I don't know. It's tough. It's tough when the Jazz, I mean, if I'm being honest, they technically have 2 all-star caliber players for this year in Lauri and Keyonte. Now you got some bigs. Obviously, you have Flukowski, you got Kevin Love. They lost Kessler Edwards to an injury. That was a tough hit. But I just think that they've been so electric. This is the most Utah Jazz games I've seen this year than in my entire life. Like I swear. So I do think there's probably gonna have to be some sit down conversations around the All-Star break. Like I'm not saying they're gonna shut down Keyonte, but it's like Keontae's been that good that he's hurting their lottery chances. And this is a draft that you really can't miss on in terms of finding that next guy. And at least for now, if you know you have Lauri, if you know you have, Keyonte George, if you hit on the Ace Bailey pick, let's say 2-3 years from now, that's when he really pans out, hits his ceiling. You hit on that, and then you're able to get one of these guys from the draft. Now you're talking about a real core. Because now Lauri might not have to be the most vital, impactful, important, like franchise player. As he gets into his mid-30s, if you decide to retain him, you have some young bucks that will be able to carry the load for him. So, yeah, I wanted to note that. I wanted to give Keyonte some credit. I talked about him real early when he really was, really surprising people with his performances on a night-to-night basis. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I want to ask the chat because the numbers say that he's kind of hurting the rebuild because he's playing well and they're winning. But at the same time, you do have to take into account that these are one of those draft classes that you don't want to miss out on. So I don't know what type of message you send Keyonte. But he's having a hell of a year. I think he and Lauri are borderline all-stars. I don't think you can send 2 all-star guys when you are not in the play-in. I don't make the rules. personally, I mean, I would think about it. I would really heavily think about it. I think they should get one because Lauri's averaging like 30 a night. It's probably going to be Lauri, but Keyonte definitely has probably just as much of an argument. My last NBA observation, Jalen Green, his imminent return from his hamstring injury that he had aggravated about, I think it's been 6 weeks, right? 6-7 weeks since he aggravated it in his second game versus the Clippers. When he does return, because the Suns, they have the 9th best net rating over the past 15 games. If they can get Jalen Green to come back, right? Get Jalen Green back, you alleviate Book of so many blitzes, and I'm pretty sure I saw on Twitter earlier today that Booker is like 3rd in on-ball gravity, which means he's gotten the 3rd most attention. It's crazy. These advanced metrics, you can define and categorize anything about any player. Basically, they weren't saying that he's the most blitzed. I think they have a particular metric for that, but they were saying that Devin Booker gets the 3rd most attention by defenses across the league. Jalen Green's going to help that because I don't think Booker can sustain that the entire year. And I think that's why he has some games where shots might be flat, might be too strong. You know, he gets insane coverages. Him and Luka. I think KD, Luka, and Booker, they get the most insane coverages. And I think Jalen Green's going to be really, really, really important to how the rest of the season plays out. They've gotten a really, really good, like, Dylan Brooks shot-making season. Like I said, he's also been a most improved candidate for me because I've never seen him at this level prior. He's probably going to get a couple All-Star votes because he's just as much of a reason as Booker as to why the Suns are where they are in the Western Conference. He's been ultra, ultra dependable. He's been great in odds, schemes. As a point of attack defender, 3-point shooter. He's been insane as a pull-up mid-range shooter. He's hitting turnarounds on both shoulders. With the Kobe's on, like Dylan Brooks is coming out different. So if he can maintain that, Jalen Green comes on and he can be that go-to scorer like he showed in that very first game, then you're on the cusp of something. Because the difference between this Suns team now when they're getting Jalen Green back and the Suns team prior is they didn't have Gillespie playing at this level. Like, he is the guy at point for the Suns. You got Grayson Allen coming off the bench. I believe you have Royce O'Neal. The starting lineup is Gillespie, Booker. It might be Royce, Brooks, and Mark Williams. I think that's their lineup. But you have some guys coming off the bench. Obviously, when Green gets inserted, it'll probably be Booker and Green, maybe Royce, Dillon, Mark, or some sort of modifying of those guys in the starting lineup. But the Suns, just like the Blazers, I would say that is a West team I would keep an eye out on because they're playing well and they're getting another score, which is going to make their franchise players' life a lot easier. And that's dangerous for, like I said, a team that has been playing well. They've been beating good teams. They have been really, really beating good teams. And, let's just see what happens. Hey, for those of you on here, man, follow me on Twitch. You got all the socials down there. Subscribe on YouTube. You guys already know the deal. Like, this is a streamed version. The edited version will go on YouTube. And we're going to go from there. Shout out to Nasser family for locking in with me. Season 5 shit. I don't even do the headphones no more, man. I got the mic on me. Bluetooth. We got that low shimmy playing. So you already know what we're doing. You already know that. All right, chat. Stay warm. More NFL playoffs tomorrow. Go Pats. Drake May MVP. Drizzy May. Now holla at you.